You did not imagine it. Something changed, and your body noticed before your mind could explain it. The pauses felt different. The warmth shifted into space, not cold, but distance. This is often the moment when anxiety begins to speak louder than intuition. The mind rushes to fill the silence with meaning. Questions appear quickly, one after another, each one heavier than the last. Did I say something wrong? Did I miss something? Did I matter less than before? Angels describe this moment as a crossroads between perception and assumption. What you sense is real, but the story you attach to it is still forming. Distance, in its earliest stage, is information without translation. You are not being punished. You are not being tested. And you are not failing at connection. Distance does not always arrive to end something. Sometimes it arrives to slow it down before it breaks. When someone pulls back, the nervous system often interprets it as danger. The body tightens. Thoughts repeat. The heart prepares for loss before loss has actually occurred. Angels ask you to pause here, because this is where self-blame usually begins, and self-blame is rarely the truth. You may be replaying conversations, scanning messages, rereading moments for clues. This is the mind trying to regain control over uncertainty. But connection does not deepen through control. It deepens through safety. Distance often appears when a person feels overwhelmed, not when they feel indifferent. It can emerge when emotions grow too strong to process easily. It can surface when someone is being asked internally to grow, reflect, or recalibrate. Angels say emotional distance is often misread because it does not speak in words. It speaks in timing, in energy, in what is not said. The absence of reassurance does not always mean the absence of care. Sometimes it means the absence of clarity within the other person. This is important for you to hear. Their distance is not proof that you are too much. It is often proof that they are dealing with more than they know how to hold. When this happens, many people instinctively move closer. They reach out more. They explain themselves. They try to restore connection by effort. But angels gently remind you that closeness cannot be forced into existence. It either grows naturally or it retreats for a reason. Distance is not always rejection. Sometimes it is regulation. There are moments when someone needs space not to escape you, but to understand themselves. There are moments when stepping back is the only way they can avoid doing harm. Silence, in these cases, is not cruelty. It is containment. This does not mean you must wait. It does not mean you must accept uncertainty indefinitely. It means the situation is more complex than a single cause. Angels describe distance as a message that has not yet learned how to speak. It carries meaning, but not accusation. It asks for observation, not reaction. Notice how this space is affecting you. Notice whether you are abandoning your own calm to interpret someone else's behavior. Notice whether you are shrinking to maintain connection. Distance reveals not only the other person's capacity, but also your own patterns. It shows you how you respond when certainty disappears. It shows you whether you move toward yourself or away from yourself. This pause may feel uncomfortable, but it is also informative. It highlights where your boundaries live. It shows you how much closeness you need to feel safe. Angels say this moment is not asking you to solve anything yet. It is asking you to stay grounded in yourself. You do not need to chase clarity. You do not need to extract meaning from silence. You are allowed to let the space exist without turning it into a verdict. Distance does not automatically mean loss. It means something is reorganizing. And while that happens, your task is not to fill the gap. Your task is to remain intact within it. There is wisdom in not collapsing into assumptions. There is strength in allowing time to reveal what urgency cannot. This is the first layer of understanding, and it is enough for now. When distance continues, the mind usually tries to name it quickly. Labels feel safer than ambiguity. Rejection, avoidance, loss, indifference. These words arrive fast, because they give shape to discomfort. But angels describe emotional distance as a signal, not a sentence. It does not conclude anything on its own. It points toward an internal process that is still unfolding. Many people withdraw when they are overwhelmed by their own emotions, not because they feel less, but because they feel more than they can manage. Intensity without tools often turns into silence. There are people who are never taught how to stay present while uncertain. When emotions rise, they step back instinctively. Distance becomes their way of preventing damage, even when it creates confusion. This is why self-blame does not belong here. Another person's coping strategy is not a measure of your worth. Their retreat is not evidence that you failed to be enough. Angels say that emotional distance often appears at moments of internal transition, when someone is questioning their direction, when they are facing growth they did not plan for, when they are afraid of repeating old patterns. In these moments, connection feels risky, not because it lacks value, but because it holds consequences. Being close requires honesty, and honesty requires readiness. Distance can also emerge when someone realizes they can no longer relate in the same way. This does not always mean the bond is ending. Sometimes it means the old version of the bond has reached its limit. Growth asks for space. Integration needs quiet. This is where misinterpretation often happens. The one who stays present feels abandoned. The one who steps back feels flooded. Both experience fear, but express it differently. Angels encourage you to observe without assigning fault, to see the distance without turning it into a story of rejection, to let meaning reveal itself through consistency rather than assumption. Silence does not always hide another person. Sometimes it hides their confusion. There are truths people cannot speak until they understand them themselves. There are emotions they cannot share until they learn how to hold them. Distance, in these cases, is a holding pattern. This does not mean you must tolerate uncertainty without limits. Your needs matter. Your sense of stability matters. But clarity rarely comes from pressure. It comes from allowing space to do its work. Angels say distance often asks you to shift focus back to yourself, not as punishment, as rebalancing. When attention turns inward, you reconnect with your own ground. You remember who you are when you are not waiting for someone else's response. You restore your rhythm instead of synchronizing it to absence. This is not detachment. It is self-respect. Distance can reveal where you have been overextending emotionally, where you have been holding more than your share, where you have been measuring yourself through another person's availability. In this sense, distance becomes a teacher, not because it feels kind, but because it shows you where you need to return to yourself. Angels say you are not meant to shrink to maintain connection. Closeness that requires self-abandonment is not closeness. It is endurance. If the distance dissolves later, it will do so through honesty and readiness. If it transforms into something new, it will do so through clarity. Either outcome asks you to remain whole. You are not being tested on how long you can wait. You are being guided toward equilibrium. Let the space exist without filling it with fear. Let time reveal what urgency distorts. Let yourself stay grounded while the situation finds its shape. Distance does not define your value. It reflects another person's process. And your process right now is about staying centered while things recalibrate. This is the second layer of understanding. It deepens without demanding action. There is another layer beneath what you see on the surface, and it has very little to do with distance itself. It has to do with how you interpret pauses when connection is no longer immediate. This is where meaning is either clarified or distorted. Angels say many people confuse distance with absence, when in reality it is often a form of transition. Something is moving from one state to another, and movement requires space. When space appears, the mind wants to fill it with certainty, but certainty is not always available yet. At this stage, the most important thing is not what the other person is doing. It is what you are doing internally while you wait. Are you holding yourself steady, or are you unraveling to reach clarity faster? Distance becomes harmful only when it pulls you away from your own center, when you abandon your routines, when you silence your needs, when your sense of worth begins to fluctuate based on someone else's availability. Angels emphasize that this moment is not asking you to fix anything. It is asking you to notice yourself, to see how quickly you move toward explanation instead of presence. There is a quiet strength in allowing ambiguity without turning it into a verdict. This strength does not come from indifference. It comes from trust in your ability to remain intact even without answers. Often, people who create distance are not rejecting connection. They are overwhelmed by the responsibility of it. They may sense that something important is forming, and that awareness alone can feel heavy. Fear does not always look like withdrawal because of lack of care. Sometimes it looks like withdrawal because the care feels too significant to mishandle. This is difficult to understand when you are on the receiving end of silence, but angels ask you to consider this gently. Not every pause is a closing. Some are recalibrations. At this point, you may notice an urge to reach out again, to explain yourself more clearly, to make sure nothing was misunderstood. Ask yourself whether this urge comes from clarity or from anxiety. One feels calm and grounded. The other feels urgent and restless. Distance invites discernment. It asks you to distinguish between action that aligns with your values and action that soothes discomfort temporarily. Only one of these leads to genuine resolution. You are allowed to need reassurance. You are allowed to want connection. But you are not required to chase stability by sacrificing your own peace. Angels say that when distance appears, it often reveals an imbalance that existed quietly before. One person carrying more emotional weight. One person adapting more. One person waiting more. This pause exposes that dynamic clearly, not to punish you, to show you what needs adjustment. You may also notice that the distance creates space for reflection you did not have before. You begin to see patterns more clearly. You recognize what you tolerate and what you desire. This awareness is not accidental. It is part of the message the distance carries. Closeness that returns after understanding is different from closeness that resumes out of fear. One is grounded. The other is fragile. Angels say you are being invited to choose the version that honors you, regardless of how the situation resolves. If reconnection happens, it will require honesty on both sides. If separation unfolds, it will do so with clarity rather than confusion. Either path leads you forward, not backward. This is why you are not being abandoned. You are being guided away from uncertainty that erodes you. Distance is not a judgment on your value. It is a signal about capacity, timing, and readiness. As you sit with this moment, allow yourself to breathe without reaching for conclusions. Let the space inform you instead of frighten you. Trust that truth does not hide forever. Angels say that whatever is meant to continue will return with clarity, and whatever is not will make itself known gently, not cruelly. Your role is not to force the outcome. Your role is to remain aligned with yourself while it unfolds. This is where peace begins to replace overthinking. Not because everything is resolved, but because you stop abandoning yourself while waiting. And that shift matters more than any answer. As time continues, distance begins to show its final function. It clarifies rather than confuses. Not through explanation, but through how it changes your relationship with yourself. When you stop chasing certainty, your nervous system settles. You sleep more deeply. You think more clearly. You feel less compelled to interpret every silence. This is when distance stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like information that has already done its work. Angels say that by this stage, something important has shifted inside you. You are no longer waiting to be chosen in order to feel whole. You are no longer measuring your worth by responsiveness or proximity. You are present with yourself again. This internal return is not accidental. It is the purpose of the pause. Whether the other person moves closer again or remains where they are, you are no longer suspended in uncertainty. You have reclaimed your center, and from that place, outcomes lose their power to destabilize you. If reconnection happens, it will feel different now, slower, more honest, less charged with fear. You will notice that you no longer need constant reassurance. You will listen more carefully to actions rather than words. You will sense whether the connection supports mutual presence or recreates old imbalances. Angels say this is discernment, not detachment. You are not closing your heart. You are opening it with clarity. If the distance remains or grows, you will notice something else. You will grieve, but without self-erasure. You will feel sadness without collapse. You will move forward without losing yourself in questions. This is emotional maturity forming quietly. Distance teaches you how to stand without leaning. It reminds you that closeness is a choice, not a requirement for survival. It returns your attention to your own rhythm. You may also recognize that what you truly wanted was not constant contact, but safety. Not constant reassurance, but consistency. Not intensity, but presence. These realizations are not losses. They are upgrades in understanding. Angels say that when you stop chasing what feels distant, you begin attracting what feels aligned. Not because you force it, but because you are no longer signaling fear. Peace is attractive. Grounded presence invites grounded connection. Whatever comes next will meet you where you are now, not where you were before the pause. And that matters. You are no longer interpreting distance as a verdict on your worth. You are reading it as context, as timing, as information. This shift restores your calm without needing answers. It allows you to move through uncertainty with dignity. Angels remind you that nothing meant to stay in your life requires you to abandon yourself, and nothing meant to leave does so to punish you. Distance is not the enemy. Self-abandonment is. By choosing understanding over overthinking, you change the entire dynamic. You remove pressure. You remove fear. You remove the need to chase. And in that space, truth becomes visible. Whatever the outcome, you will recognize it when it arrives. It will not feel confusing. It will not feel heavy. It will feel clear. That is how guidance works. Not through urgency, through alignment. You trusted timing instead of fear. You chose peace instead of self-blame. You stayed present instead of unraveling. And because of that, you are no longer waiting helplessly. You are moving forward, quietly, intact. Distance did not take something from you. It gave you back yourself. And that is never a loss.